In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I think we have a fun episode here. Krysten, Peak, and I, we are going to share our thoughts on what could be a new wave of recruiting in college basketball. Should the top prospects go to Blue Bloods, or should they go to schools like BYU or Oklahoma, where they can have the ball in their hands and fully showcase their NBA potential? Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, Krysten Peak. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the new wave of recruiting. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know about the Locked On newsletter. You can check it out at lockedondaily.com. Your favorite Locked On NBA podcast now has the newsletter that will be delivered right to your inbox every single morning. And also, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can make every moment more. And you can start the season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. And also, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because we are your daily source for NBA draft content. And please click the subscribe button. All right, let's get into this episode. I know Krysten has been busy covering high school basketball, traveling all over. This is a big time of year. What is the latest high school basketball tournament that you've covered?
I was at Tarkanian Classic, and then I called all the games for the EYBL Scholastic League that was here in Vegas. So I haven't gone anywhere, but I will be going to New York the day after Christmas for, I think it's like a Jordan Brand sort of tournament. I don't know what it is, but I'm calling all the games there, and we will see Link Academy, which I think is one of the top teams in the country, face off with Christopher Columbus. That's the Boozers. Which I think is going to be like a 1 versus 2 sort of situation. So that's after Christmas. And then after the New Year, it's Hoop Hall West. And then a week later, it's Hoop Hall Classic. You know, Rafael, like in Springfield, Massachusetts. I mean, nobody ever goes there ever. It's where it's where the Basketball Hall of Fame is. But they have the high school Mecca tournament, showcase, whatever, every year. And of course, it's the end of January, so the weather is always horrible and difficult to get to. So that's kind of like the next month of coverage for me.
Would you say that's the biggest one? Has it passed like City of Palms?
I mean, City of Palms is great. It's going on right now. You can catch all the games on the NBA app. I'll give a free shout out to my co-workers, my co-hosts, John Fanta, Adam Finkelstein are calling all the games at City of Palms. And the City of Palms is great, and it has great matchups, but you don't know, because it's a tournament, you don't know who you're going to see, so at least for like the Hoop Hall Classic, it's just a showcase. So you already know the great matchups that are happening, and it's obviously like NBA certified, and so is City of Palms. So you're going to see, especially this week, like I would be there, like going back and forth between the G League Showcase in Orlando and the City of Palms, in Fort Myers, so you're going to see GMs and scouts going back and forth. And then of course, through the new year and everything, it's crazy. Like you think, and we haven't even talked about this. Like you think of like NBA scouts just going to like the top college games and getting looks on like Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, whatever, all the top players. But they are also in the high school ranks, and they're at Tarkanian Classic. I want to say I saw about 35 scouts, when Darren Peterson was playing, when Tyron Stokes was playing yesterday and the day before. So they year round are not only watching like college players and international players, but they're also keeping tabs on the high school side as well.
Which is fairly new. I mean, within the last few years, I feel like the only event that they could go to was Peach Jam, if I'm not mistaken.
It was McDonald's All-American, Hoop
right.
Summit, and Peach Jam. That used to be the norm, and now we're seeing them at these Tarkanian Classic, Hoop Hall West, and also City of Palm. So, I mean, Adam Silver has made it a point. He said, we want to be able to see these players at a younger juncture than just in their 1 year in college. So the fact that we see the NBA partnering with the EYBL and the EYBL Scholastic League and Nike and being able to broadcast these events and NBA scouts are allowed to go there. Like, that is a new step in the direction of NBA scouts and front office executives being able to see these players at a younger age.
No, it makes sense. You definitely want to have a wider range of games. And also, what's so important right now is the intel. You want to be able to gather years of intel. So you're seeing a lot of teams starting to hire grassroots scouts, which is, this is new. This has all changed in the last few years. But speaking of change, I think there is a change, or going to be a change going forward, in where some of the top recruits are going. We started to see a little bit of it in the past, but this episode, I'll be honest, it was inspired by this tweet I saw from Gilbert Arenas. And I know Gilbert's podcast is, they have a lot of hot takes on there. They're excellent at creating engagement. But Gilbert had mentioned that he felt like there are a lot of players that are choosing the bag as far as the NIL money over the right fit for basketball. And I took it a step further, and I felt like we're starting to see a lot of players maybe do the opposite. They are choosing the right fit basketball wise that is giving them an opportunity to put the ball in their hands and give them a higher usage, as opposed to going to some of the blue blood schools where they may be one of 4 top 100 recruits. And then, some of these schools are bringing in older transfers, and they're not really getting the full opportunity to basically show to NBA scouts that this is what I'm capable of with high usage. Dylan Harper is an example, and Ace Bailey. They chose to go to Rutgers over some of the higher or the blue blood schools. We talked about AJ Dybantsa going to BYU as opposed to North Carolina and so on. So what are your thoughts on this new wave, and do you think it's good or bad for college basketball?
I think it's great, honestly, and we are still, Rafael, in the wild west of NIL and recruiting, and the money that is being tossed around, between all these universities is just insane. So I think when we see these players taking advantage of that, and that, let's be honest, that's what it is, then that's a positive for the player, because they are getting paid their worth, and also for the university, because if I'm honest, if we look at any high major recruit, let's look at Caitlin Clark. What did she bring to Iowa City when she was at Iowa? What sort of money, what sort of ticket sales did she bring in? So when you look at that, and you have other teams like BYU, like Rutgers, looking at the fact that one player, Caitlin Clark, brought in all this money to this town, then they are willing to say, yes, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, we will give you this amount of money in NIL money. Yes, AJ Dybantsa, for you to come to Provo for 6 months and be the number 1 player and have your name always attached to our university, we will give you X amount of money. And can I just say, I want to be the one to clear this up. It is not $7 to $9 million that he's getting. It's between $3 to $4 million. Okay. So all the reports that you're seeing, it is not that extravagant, but it is a substantial amount of money. So the fact that the NCAA has not put a cap on NIL and what, certain LLCs and collectives can give these players is giving the advantage to smaller teams that are not blue bloods to be able to go out and land these top prospects.
But do you think it's giving them an advantage? Because on one hand, I can say, oh yeah, I can see how it gives them an advantage. But on the other hand, I can say the blue blood schools have usually the bigger alumni base, and they even have fans that aren't even alumni that may have been like a North Carolina fan growing up from watching who knows. And then
then why didn't Duke land Dylan Harper? Why didn't North Carolina or Alabama or Kansas land AJ Dybantsa? You know what I mean? Like, I understand the fan base, but when we're talking about the money being thrown around, like, that's going to offset and that's going to trump whatever like fan base or blue blood sort of history there is.
But on the other end, you can say Duke got Cooper Flagg.
They had the number one class coming in. No, that's always going to happen. You're always going to see blue blood wins. Darren Peterson is going to Kansas. Obviously, Cooper Flagg went to Duke, and they had, Kaman Malawach. They had, the number one recruiting class coming in. That's always going to happen. And by the way, like, Duke does have that money. Like, they have a general manager in Rachel Baker who is making moves. She's making, different deals for these players to be able to have these NIL deals once they get on campus. But that's always going to happen. I just think it's leveled the playing field a little bit for schools like Rutgers, for schools like Georgia, getting Asa Newell there. You know what I mean? For BYU, like, it's evening the playing field and not just like a blue blood destination anymore.
Nope, I agree. All right, up next, I'm going to ask Krysten her opinion. If she were managing a high usage projected top 10 pick, what type of program would she steer him or her to? Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the absolute best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Join now, because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million. And this week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points, Anthony Edwards for 25 points or more, and also Anthony Davis for more than 12 rebounds, and Luka Doncic for 8+ assists. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. Everything is delivered right to your door. It is discreet. It is plain packaging. And with Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinic. Complete a 100% online consultation, and you could get your free prescription today. So visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. And right now, our listeners can get 40% off their first order when you choose the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions apply. All right, second segment. So I'm proposing a question for you, Krysten. You are managing, or a parent reaches out to you and says, hey, you've been around this a long time. You've seen a lot. My kid is projected as a top 10 pick. He's best with the ball in his hands. What type of situation is best for him? Do you go to a blue blood school? Do you take the Darren Peterson route? Do you go to Duke or wherever? Or do you go to like a BYU? And so the examples that I think of when I think of guys that chose to take a different route, Trae Young, who had one, I mean, to me, just a very underrated freshman season.
Well, and can we just stop at Trae Young there? Like, the reason why he went to Oklahoma, he was gonna go to Kentucky with Calipari, and they took Quade Green. So Kentucky fans hearing that and seeing the season he had at Oklahoma, like that wasn't necessarily like I'm going to go to the right situation. It was because Kentucky took a different guard in Quade Green. And now looking at it, probably wasn't the best decision. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. So that was one. Cade Cunningham. Now we for those that don't know, Cade's brother was on the staff at Oklahoma State, but Cade his brother was hired to be on the staff at Oklahoma State. Cade ended up being the number 1 pick, played in the Big 12, had the opportunity to play against all of the top teams in a major conference, but he had total freedom. Then I look at Anthony Edwards, who was the number 1 pick, chose to go to Georgia, didn't have the best team around him, but he had a high usage, had that crazy monster game against Michigan State. So he was still allowed to play against Power 5 competition on TV, was the number 1 pick. Those are examples that I think, and of course, Dylan Harper this year, he's averaging I think he's 3rd in the nation in scoring, if I'm not mistaken.
He's on a tear.
Right. I don't know if he gets that opportunity at Kansas, at Duke, definitely not at North Carolina. So I think it makes sense for some of these top prospects, especially the ones that are best with the ball in their hands, to go to a situation where they have the keys. What are your thoughts? And how would you advise a prospect?
This is what I'll say. And people look at it like parents and high school coaches, AAU coaches, they're always like, we got to get our player here. And it's usually, like at Duke, at Kentucky, Arkansas now, whatever, like North Carolina, we have to get our player here. And I want to say, and I want to be an advocate for, it doesn't matter where you are. NBA scouts, if you are good enough, they will find you. Hello, Dylan Jones at Weber State last year in Ogden, Utah. And it was a game against Northern Colorado. And there were over 30 scouts at this game. And the SID said to me afterwards, we have not had this amount of scouts, this amount of interest in a player since Damian Lillard. So that just goes to show it doesn't matter where you play. If you are good enough, NBA scouts and executives will find you, and they will find you and they will come watch you. And when we look at Dylan Jones, he was a 1st-round pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder, was playing in a mid-major. And so when we look at I have to play for a blue blood, I have to play at the top organization, the transfer portal has changed that. And also the fact that these scouting teams in the NBA are just relentless. If you are good enough, they will find you and they will be at your game and they will be watching you.
But I want to add some context to that game. Northern Colorado had St. Thomas, who was averaging 19.
Who's now at USC. Yes.
He's now at USC. Funny story. I went to high school with Saint's mom. so I remember when he was when he was a little dude. But to add on to that, Dylan Jones and those scouts were at that game because Dylan Jones was in a situation where he had high usage. They were there to watch Saint also. He had a high usage. He had the ball in his hands. He's at USC now. He's not getting the same opportunity. I'm sure that his pockets are fatter because USC has a bigger budget. But I think there is a struggle to find the balance between NIL and I imagine, how do you turn down $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 if you're 19 years old, but you may not be in the best basketball situation? I look at Isaiah Evans at Duke. I don't think he's in the best basketball situation. I think if he goes to Vanderbilt, where he's given the keys, he's probably a 1st-round pick on everybody's mock draft.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's a tough balance between NIL, the right fit, but also turning down the school that you probably grew up rooting for, or turning down a Tom Izzo that comes into your house and goes to recruit you. So I think it's good for college basketball, but I also feel I think it's going to be a trend of seeing guys turn down some of the top blue blood schools.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, there's 2 sides to this entire story of NIL, the transfer portal, and the amount of money that is being tossed around.
In your opinion, what is the deciding factor for most kids? I mean, of course, there's not always a consensus, but do you think it is the NIL? Or do you think it's the school? Or do you think it's the fit?
I think it's got a lot to do with the fit, the offensive touches, especially if we're looking at the top players, the relationship with the coaching staff. Like, Rafael, you and I talk to coaches all the time, and it's like they are in babysitting mode as soon as the player commits, and they're not resting until that player gets on campus. So, being able to show your star player, your star recruit, like you are number one. You're going to have the ball in your hands. We're going to get some pieces around you. We're going to hunt the transfer portal and build a squad around you. Like, that's always appealing. So I never think it ever just comes down to money. I think it's multiple things that, have a kid going to a Duke or a UConn or, a Colorado State, whatever it is. Like, that is just the lay of the land and how comfortable they feel and fit in the program.
All right, up next, we're going to talk about a few players that it may not have worked for. They chose to take an untraditional route, and it may not have worked in their favor. But then also, I want to ask Krysten about NIL and how it is impacting teams, because in my opinion, I feel like there are some teams that have big NIL budgets, and they're looking to put together the best team, which is what they're supposed to do. But it also kind of hurts some of the guys because they may not be getting the same opportunities they had at the program that they left. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it is all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more, and it's on the same page where you placed your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, last segment. I think, and if it were me and if it were my kid, I would probably choose an opportunity where I think he's going to have the ball in his hands the most. Yes, I want him to win, but when it comes to the NBA draft, sometimes winning doesn't matter. I mean, what was Georgia's record with Anthony Edwards? I think they were like
Georgia or Washington when Markelle went number 1?
Yeah. And that's Markelle Fultz is a great example. Chose a different route, goes to Washington.
He was so good as a high school recruit. He was so good. He had like go-go gadget arms that like went past his knees, was so good with the ball in his hands. Like, Markelle was, if you go back and look at his high school resume and what he did, was incredible.
But he chose to go to Washington. I talked about Cade Cunningham, talked about Trae Young. On the flip side, there are guys like Emoni Bates, who didn't go to a blue blood. Now, I know people that felt like if he would have went to Michigan State, he may have been in a better situation because he would have had the discipline that he needed. And then there's Patrick Baldwin, who, I'll be honest, I was never sold on Patrick Baldwin. But to me, he wasn't a high usage guy. He's more so of a complimentary piece. I do think that going to a school with better players around him could have helped him out. He still ended up being a first-round pick, strictly based off of his high school resume. And then you have Isaiah Collier, who chose to go to USC, which is, think of it as a football school, was the number one, depending on who you talk to, the number one player in the country in high school, goes to USC. He ends up being the last pick in the first round. So you can say it didn't work out for him. So there is a balance. Are there any other players, in your opinion, that it really worked out for, and some guys that it may not have worked out for?
Absolutely. We see it every year. Like, there's always those situations where these players end up in situation like Isaiah Collier going to USC and having to figure it out with 2 other point guards in the backcourt when you are a ball dominant guard. Like, how are you not seeing this? How are you not seeing this happen? And so, yeah, we see those instances, and then we see the coaching staff just like they're like, no, we're going to be the outlier. We're going to make this work. We're going to make this happen. I honestly feel like we're seeing that a little bit with Baylor this year, with VJ Edgecombe going in with 3 other point guards, Jeremy Roach, who is great with the ball in his hands, obviously the 5th-year senior who was previously at Duke. Like, how do you make this relationship? How do you make these players work? And that's the goal every year if you're a head coach, but it's never that easy. Like, there's always something going on, so anytime you see a player that is going to a certain situation, you always want to be honest and truthful with the head coach. You want to get that honest feedback of like, no, you are going to have the ball in your hands. No, you are going to be the complimentary piece. Like, if you come here, yeah, we're going to be terrible. Are you okay with that? Patrick Baldwin Jr.? No, you're not. Maybe you should go to Kansas, not play for me, Dad. Like, those are the conversations that should be happening, but they don't always happen. And it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, I mean, for Jeremiah Fears, it has totally worked out for him.
Whew. Did you see this coming? I know your brother, I will give him props. He has been high on him. And I feel like all of us are in the dust. Like, oh my gosh, how is this guy still producing at the high rate that he's producing? Like that, he has been the biggest surprise, I think, to me in this draft.
Without a doubt, he's been the biggest surprise. And so when I look at his situation, I talked about it in another podcast briefly, and I look at Ian Jackson's situation. In my mind, if Ian Jackson goes to a situation similar to Jeremiah Fears, we're talking about him a lot more. When I watched what Ian did against Florida in the second half, I'm like, he needs the keys. He needs somewhere where he can get loose.
Yeah.
It's not in that situation.
No, I mean, but like, is he going to get drafted this year based solely on potential and like what we've seen with his like 10 minutes per game or whatever? Like, is it going to work out for him, or is he going to have to transfer? That's another thing. Like, you go to these blue bloods and you have a year to prove yourself. And if you don't, you're going to get recruited over. So like going to a situation where you're going to have the keys to the car is always, I think that trumps every single scenario of like, this is my dream school. This was everything. Like, if your goal is you want to make the NBA, like, you need to have as many offensive touches as possible.
I agree 100%. But then I look at Kansas, for example, and we saw Kansas last year didn't have any depth. And then it just seems like the collective when they say, we're going to buy a good team. In my personal opinion, I do not feel like AJ Storr or Rylan Griffin are in better basketball situations than they were at their last schools. Now, Rylan, Alabama was loaded, but AJ Storr was, if he stays at Wisconsin, he might be getting 15 shots a game.
Yeah. I mean, but sometimes like you look at those situations with older players, because what do we know that trumps everything in the NBA draft? It's youth, it's length, and it's upside. So when you are that older player, you might just chase the bag. You might just chase the money and go to a higher program. It doesn't matter if you are going to have more offensive touches at your current university. Like, you just want to make the most money that you possibly can in this NIL era, regardless.
Well, here's an example for you. Cam Jones. I'm sure bigger schools were probably like, hey, you led Marquette in scoring, come here. He chose to stay. And what does he get a chance to do this year? Prove to everybody that I can make plays for others.
He's so good. I watched the Butler game last night. I'm like, I love this kid. He's so good. He's so good. Continue, please.
But I think it's going to work out for him. I mean, Marquette is not a blue blood school, but it's a really good program. He stays there. He's in a situation where he has boosted his draft stock. And I thought that at one point, I felt like him and AJ Storr, at least last year, were in the same tier of prospects. And now I think it is totally different. AJ may win a national championship. That's valuable. But I think Cam Jones is in the much better basketball situation because he has the keys to the car, and he's showing NBA teams that I can pass. Yes, I led the team in scoring last year. And no, it wasn't simply because I had Oso Ighodaro and Tyler Kolek set me up. Now I'm getting an opportunity to show that I can score. His efficiency has been better. Of course, we're not in the thick of the schedule yet, but his efficiency has been better with a higher usage. And I think that he's in a much better basketball situation than some of the other players that left to go get a bigger NIL bag,
Right.
allegedly, at a blue blood program.
Right. No, that is a fair point. It's a great example. I love watching Cam Jones. I'm a big fan. Like Cam is just like a Shaka Smart point guard. Like he's just a Shaka player. Like that's all that is. You know what I mean? And like it's been so fun watching him early in the season have the success that he has. And like, you know, he could be in the conversation this year, depending on how league play goes or whatever, for player of the year. Yeah. That's how good he is.
So as far as like the 2025 recruiting class, name some prospects that you believe, if they haven't already done it, are going to bypass some of the blue bloods and go to situations where they're probably going to have a higher usage or a bigger role.
I mean, obviously, AJ Dybantsa is number one. He's going to BYU. He's going to have the keys to the car. He's going to have the ball in his hands. I also think Jalen Harlison going to Notre Dame. Nate Ament, who could also join him at Notre Dame. They could be, you know, a good tandem there. And then we see, you know, the players that are going to Houston, like choosing Calvin Sampson and going down there, like Krysten and Kingston Flemings, like those are players that are choosing to be coached hard and by a Hall of Fame coach and going to a program where they know it's not going to be easy at all. And choosing that over, you know, like the Arkansas, well, is Arkansas blue blood? I think of Calipari, whatever, like Arkansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, like they're choosing different programs that they know that they're going to be able to get the best out of them.
Yes. And so the last player I want to talk about is it Darius Acuff?
Oh yeah, Darius Acuff is on a tear. He's leading the EYBL Scholastic League in scoring. He is just a bucket getter at IMG. He's going to Arkansas, playing for Coach Calipari. He chose them over UConn. And like that dude, I think he is the number one scorer in high school basketball right now. Like he is a bucket getter.
Phenomenal scorer. And so, and I know like the people around him are close to Trae Young. And I'm probably going to ask them at some point offline, what made them choose Arkansas? And obviously you can point to Cal's track record with, not at Arkansas, but, you know, at Memphis and at Kentucky, whether it's John Wall, De'Aaron Fox, and so on. But I'm curious to know what made them choose Arkansas over a situation like what Trae had at Oklahoma, because they're connected. Like there's a connection there between his family and Trae Young's camp. But I'm curious to know what made them choose Arkansas. I mean, of course, Cal's track record speaks for itself. Do you think he's the type of player that Calipari is going to just say, hey, I'm going to let you have the offense like I did with De'Aaron, like I did with John Wall, like I did with Derrick Rose? Do you think Cal would give him that freedom? Because he didn't give it to Rob Dillingham. Now, Rob still ended up being a top 10 pick. And then also, does DJ Wagner come back to school? Because right now I feel like even though he's gotten better, he has no buzz. And for Acuff, is he going to get full opportunity to show what he's capable of if DJ Wagner is back?
I don't think DJ stays, if I'm being completely honest. Like if he does not enter the draft, I think he transfers, and I think he knows that too. We even see it. Yeah, man. Like he's not going to have the ball. Like it's going to be Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas from Overtime Elite, who I just saw score 38 points. Like this dude is a shooting machine. Like he's going to need his touches. So when we're looking at the freshmen coming in to Arkansas, I think this is one of those situations where they push DJ out. Like Darius is a prolific scorer. He's so good. And then you add that with Malik Thomas. Like, what are you going to tell your 2-star freshman coming in? You guys aren't going to get touches? Like, is this going to be a Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd situation? If that's the case, then like you guys aren't winning because your two best players are coming off the bench. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, I don't know how you balance that situation, but I do think it's one of those things where if DJ stays, he's going to be pushed out.
I think Cal is going to be loyal to Wagner. I think that's a family first thing.
Cal is only loyal to one person, and that's himself. Like, I don't think that's a case.
I don't know. I think if there's one player that he's going to bend it for, it is the son of Dajuan Wagner.
Maybe.
Not saying that Dajuan Wagner like kickstarted his career. I mean, you can say it was Marcus Camby, but I definitely think there's some loyalty there that could impact it.
We'll see. We can agree to disagree. I don't know. I feel like the players and the playmaking that they have coming in is going to trump any sort of loyalty to DJ, unless he like sits down DJ and is like, hey man, you're going to be coming in with a secondary unit. You're not going to be running things. If you're okay with that, you can stay. If not, I'm happy to see you transfer.
I thought he should have did that after 5 games last year, and it never happened. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. It is always fun. Remember, check out the Locked On newsletter at lockedondaily.com. Your favorite Locked On NBA podcast has a newsletter delivered right to your inbox. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Hopefully everyone has a great weekend, a great holiday, and we are